Hello, beautiful community. I'm back with an emergency podcast in the vein of the newsagents and the rest is politics, who have an emergency broadcast every couple of minutes because everything now is an emergency, and this is no exception. So, you've probably all been trying to catch up or have been catching up with the shenanigans, the psychodrama that's happening in the Labour Party at the moment, and it seems to be more of the same. Another kind of sort of self-inflicted wound, a cry for help, self-harm, like cutting yourself as we go through a very strange procedure. And So I'm not going to sort of go over the nuts and bolts of that because this is the fodder of the online analysts at the moment, and TV stations like GB News and the Daily Mail are getting very, very excited about this. And this will give them some really good copy and something to gab about probably for the next 6 months. So here we go again. Are we going to follow this story right through to its bitter end? Who knows what's going to happen, and do we care, and will anything change? Probably not, but there you go. But Andy Burnham is somebody who hasn't really come on kind of a high profile political spectrum for some time. He's been buried in Manchester, wonderful Manchester, where I was born, and he's been doing a good job as mayor apparently. But every time he's interviewed, he seems to be interviewed a lot while he's running on the street or where he's walking briskly on the street. And they kind of shout a couple of questions. Do you want to be Prime Minister, Mr. Burnham? And that kind of thing. And he always comes up with the same answer. And it's pretty much all I know about him, which is that I nationalised the buses and now you only pay £2 for a fare. And I'm going to do that to the whole country. Now, does he mean that he's going to make all buses nationalised and with a flat fare of £2? No, of course he doesn't. It's a kind of metaphorical thing. He's going to start nationalising certain industries and or certain services, and I don't know what he's going to do. He's going to bring the fares down. But he has got some other ideas which I've picked up on, which is that he's quite interested in devolution, which I'm very interested in as well. The idea of devolving to the regions. Now, he doesn't say it, but I can because I'm Mr. Nobody. I believe that the devolving the regions is the only way really to save Great Britain from utter and total decline, because I think that Britain has absolutely no national identity anymore, or certainly nothing that's positive. We'll talk about the so-called national identity as identified by the Unite the Kingdom Tommy Robinson bunch, but that's really got nothing to do with reality. And anybody who's been following that on social media and seen some of the humorous, certainly humorous music that came out of the event, but also some of the hate speech, will realise, and the poor attendance will realise that that is not the future of Britain, even though, of course, J.D. Vance has been saying this is the most wonderful political movement in Britain. He said that this morning. J.D. Vance, Mr. Hillbilly himself, saying that Tommy Robinson and his ragged bunch of, well, I'm not going to say anything negative, but you know what I'm talking about. Have a look on social media at the kind of things they say, and the kind of music they listen to. I'm sure you know what you mean if you've seen some of the viral memes. You realise that, that this is not in the future of the UK. But even powerful, evil, deep forces like the American White House are behind them. But that says more about just the state of the world, really, not about the state of Britain. But Britain does not have a national identity anymore. And because of the divisive nature of UK politics, it probably never will in its current form. And that's why I've always argued for a devolving not only of Scotland and Ireland and Wales, but also of the regions themselves. Let's bring back some proud nationalism in terms of our local communities. And I think Burnham is he's got the same idea. And that's quite a good thing in a way. And also, he is in favour of proportional representation, which I've been saying for years is the only way for Britain to get out of this mess. PR is inevitable when you have a five parties. Otherwise, quite simply, you have minority governments. In other words, you have governments who are in total control, but only representing a minority of people, a small minority, actually. 20-25% is enough. In other words, 75% of the voting population, their votes are completely wasted, even though they're in the majority. So it doesn't make any sense to have a first past the post system. It's like most of Britain. It's kind of a sort of legacy to some ancient time and ancient principles. And this, of course, is the problem with Keir Starmer, but probably the problem with Andy Burnham. There's something a little bit old school about the whole thing and the process, and the people are not going to fall for it. Now, I like old school. I like boring, sensible bureaucrats. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, okay? I like principled people who don't necessarily turn up the volume like Duncan Smith did. But that's, in this modern world, this is the problem. This is why they say Britain is ungovernable. Not because it literally is ungovernable. It's just that there is now such a disconnect between that old school, reliable schoolmaster type politician or schoolmistress type politician and the way that people exist today in this fragmented, charged, hyper-dynamic world in which they live, where their brains literally are being fried to death by AI, lies, deception, and a world post-truth in which it does no longer matter whether what you say is true or not. But just by saying it, we've realised that if people are dumbed down and if people are infantilized as much as they are now, then they will just kind of form under you as if you are a vortex sucking them in. And that's how tragic things have become. But, the future is not unite the kingdom, despite what Kemi Badenoch said, where she made it clear that she supports their right to be anti-Islamic, to be racist, to have what I consider to be highly aggressive, threatening, divisive messages, and yet she says that's okay, but she doesn't think it's okay to demonstrate against the slaughter of the innocents in Palestine. But that's the world we live in. And then, as J.D. Vance is saying, this is great, this is a great political movement. We are living in a twisted, topsy-turvy world. And I would urge anybody, don't listen to me and, my little silly rants, but just to kind of listen to the words and think about objectively the reality of what these people are saying. It's a dangerous time, and remember that most of these people, Nigel Farage is the best example, are simply monetising this psychodrama. And that's all they're doing. I mean, people like Farage and Trump, they've found a fruit machine that never stops paying out. And all they have to do is keep pulling the handle. They can't believe their luck. And it's not even a secret. They don't care. But there you go. So, yeah, I just wanted to kind of talk about Burnham. So the idea is that somebody has stepped down. The guy who stepped down from his parliamentary seat to allow Burnham to become an MP so he can become leader in this long drawn out process is a guy who you're probably thinking, well, why would he just step down? He's only 30 years old and he's got a lovely political career ahead of him. He's earning 120 grand a year plus all sorts of other expenses. Nobody would just give up their job so some bloke from Andy Burnham, who's already got a bloody good job, who's earning 250,000 a year. Well, of course, there's reasons behind it, isn't there? He's giving it up because he has not had an uncheckered past in politics, even at a young age. And he has been reprimanded a couple of times. And various things, and I suspect that he's got some other irons in the fire which are far more lucrative. So Andy Burnham's going to take his seat and he's going to fight it. And the problem is he going to be able to beat reform, or is he going to fall at the first fence? We don't know. It's so exciting. Is Burnham going to make it to Prime Minister of Britain? First battle to beat reform in the by-election. The second battle to enter Parliament, and then to, I don't know, try and maybe do a leadership challenge, basically. Who knows? And you've got Wes Streeting, who's also kind of in the mix. Not very popular amongst the membership, but nevertheless, Wes Streeting, he's suddenly decided he might have a card up his sleeve, because he's the first guy, and I kind of admire him a little bit for this. He's the first guy who said we must rejoin the EU. And I've always wondered about this. It's very interesting, because it's perfectly possible now that about 55% of the voting electorate would vote in favour of going back to the EU. We're now living in a country where most people would like to rejoin the EU, but for some reason we can't, because we've kind of we've frozen stiff solid for some reason, and it's because of the nature of this new politics, and these politicians, they don't know which way to turn. That's why none of them are being particularly authentic at the moment, because they're trying to appease to everyone. But if somebody did actually say, this party represents a party that's going to rejoin the EU, it will be a gamble, but it might just pay off. And Wes Streeting's going down that route. So watch the guy. I don't know anything about him. I don't particularly find him, I don't know, that convincing, to be honest. And I think Burnham is really kind of, he feels very old school, but I don't know. Who am I? So there's been a lot. There's been a lot going on generally, but it seems to me that the discourse at the moment is the worst that one could ever imagine, and it's really frightening for the ethnic minorities that live in the UK. I'm not getting into the big debate about, immigration as such. I mean, that's there is a lot of pragmatism in there that's been forgotten with all the emotions, but some of the kind of extreme right-wing online groups like the New Culture Forum, unfortunately their leader Peter Whittle has just dropped dead, but apart from that they still continue with their generally racist message, and they've been doing long programs worrying themselves sick about the demographics, and they're looking forward 100 years, and they're kind of coming up with these weird speculative statistics that white British will only be 20% of the population and that kind of thing in 60 years, or all that kind of thing. I mean, I'm not quoting them exactly, but they're really very, very concerned about this, and they say no nation can ever exist unless it exists with its foundational national homogenous original settlers. And I thought that's really, really weird, because there's no country on earth whose demographics represent the so-called original ethnic group. I mean, so he's saying that Britain actually will cease to exist if the white population falls below a certain percentage. Interestingly, that didn't matter in America when they wiped out the American Indians. Interestingly, that didn't matter in Australia, where they wiped out the Aborigines. Didn't give a damn. But this is the sort of level of discourse we're at the moment, and we live in fairly dangerous times. But that doesn't mean to say we should be anxious or worried or concerned, because a lot of this is noise. A lot of this is happening as part of a kind of a sheen of dramatic, monetized crap, which does not really reflect how kind of normal people think and exist. But there you go. Culture is turning to steam, and that's just the way it is. If you have a infantilized population, then you can pretty much do what you want. You can form. They're malleable, and you can almost form opinions in them as though they were made of clay. You know, even the most intelligent among us at the moment is becoming basically a YouTube star. You know, it doesn't matter whether you've been a great writer, you know, or a good journalist, or a great presenter, or somebody who, it doesn't really matter. You end up on YouTube kind of monetize, or some other social media platform, somehow monetizing what you do. And by doing that, the consistency of your arguments, they tend to fall apart, in my opinion, as you kind of seek out broader and broader audiences. You know, the fact is that that there are many people now, for example, in America, the MAGA population, who believe some very strange things. And I'm not talking about one or two. I'm talking about millions. We know there are millions of people who believe the earth is flat, generally wearing MAGA hats. That's okay. But did you realize that there are hundreds of thousands of Americans, MAGA supporters, who believe that Joe Biden, in that interim term he had between the two Trump terms, didn't really exist, and that he was a puppet who had been put in there by Trump, and actually that he was played by Jim Carrey, who was wearing a rubber mask. Things like that. So, you know, what are we going to do in that situation? It's going to be tricky, it's going to be difficult, and I'm just going to leave you with the idea that the survivalists used to be those guys in America with the pickup trucks who wore the combat gear and who had a machine rifle strung over their shoulder, and then they built their own wooden house in the hills, and then they had a 300-meter perimeter, and they would patrol it each morning along with their fellow settlers, terrified that the federal government would arrive. Well, is it possible in the future that those poor sods who kind of still listen to Radio 4, who still read books, you know, who are still interested in truth, who believe in science, and who are not susceptible to any kind of crazy conspiracy theories nor religious mania, could it be that those people will be the survivalists if this carries on? Could they be the people who have to make little informal settlements to keep from the seeds at the moment of this movement, this kind of religion, which is based on kind of abhorrent values? I don't know. Who am I? You know, I mean, exactly, who am I? Well, I'll tell you who I am. I'm somebody who is on YouTube, but I used to be a lecturer, and you know, I'm an amateur psychologist, you know, and I'm an academic sociologist, but I now am rambling here. Here I am on YouTube, pleading, trying to do something a little bit, trying to sort of make my tiny voice heard. Nobody would listen to me. Nobody would read a book I wrote. You know, I've written books, and increasingly nobody reads them. This is where we all end up. So should I give up, or do we continue to rage against this dying light? It's your decision.